Old School Bodybuilding Clothing Company. If you're the hardest training person at your gym, you are old school. If you hate math but you can count by 45s, you are old school. OSBBC.com for the hardest training athletes.
After working hard at the gym, you need a mattress that works as hard as you do. Spinaline has engineered the perfect mattress for you and your active lifestyle. Don't compromise your recovery with inferior sleep. Order your Spinaline mattress today.
Hey guys, we're super excited to be here at the LA Fit Expo. It's our third year in a row. And what we're going to be doing today is we're going to be launching a tasty pastry. It's a low-carb Pop-Tart. It's got 3 to 4 grams of net carbs. And we love this show. This is our best place to be in LA.
RX Television on RxMuscle.com. This is Ask Dave, better known as hashtag Ask Dave. I'm your host, Sadiq Faruqi. This is your 30-minute question and answer show with Dave Palumbo. All your questions on diet, training, supplementation, anything and everything going on in and outside the bodybuilding world. We're going to go right into the questions. We have a lot of filming today. If you're watching this right now, earlier in the day, we dropped our episode of Iron Debate, the debate where we asked the question as far as whether or not Big Ramy deserves a special invite, whether he should get a special invite. We posted on our Instagram and pretty much started a civil war in the bodybuilding world. The first two questions, of course, from the Dave Palumbo Experience app. First question, Dave, you and Chris Aceto are good friends and the best coaches. What are some of the differences between your ways of coaching meals, carbs, keto, etc., general point of view?
I think that Chris and I have very similar philosophies in the sense that, we think that, it's when you have to suffer, you have to suffer. I think I'm a little higher and a little bit more in tune with the essential fat component. I think Chris puts a little bit of fats in, but he doesn't really, he kind of adds them as necessary, kind of like a chef would sprinkle some spices into the sauce, so to speak. Where I pretty much, design, exactly what I want fat content-wise in the diet, because I think it's really important. As far as protein, we're probably the same, a gram and a half per pound, depending on the person. And carbs are, once again, a fuel source. So I think we're probably similar on carbs. He might give a little more carbs if I'm, because I'm using fats a lot of times with my guys. So calorically speaking, I might actually be giving more calories, because fats are double the calories per gram than carbs are. So, we're similar, and the only, like I said, qualitatively speaking, I think I might just give a little more fat. He gives it maybe a little bit more carbs, but we both believe low carbs to lose body fat.
Second question, again from the Dave Palumbo Experience app. Dave, what is the optimal ratio of test Deca for therapeutic application while on TRT? Also, would it be safe to run the Deca with TRT indefinitely?
You could run Deca at 100 milligrams a week, which seems very low, and still get the quote therapeutic, anti-inflammatory effect from it. You don't need a lot of it to get that anti-inflammatory effect. So if you're looking to build muscle, you want to take 400 to 600 milligrams a week. But if you're looking to just get that, a little boost, get a little bit, have your joints feel better, 100 milligrams a week. I remember when I had first had my quad surgery 8 years ago, I did 100 milligrams of my hormone replacement I was doing 200 milligrams of hormone replacement per week of testosterone. So what I did was instead of doing 200, I did 100 of testosterone and 100 Deca. And it's weird because I always tell you there's a synergism between two compounds as opposed to one. And I definitely put on a lot of muscle just from changing the ratio. Even though you would theoretically say, well, Deca is actually weaker than testosterone, and you actually lowered your testosterone and replaced it with Deca, you would think that I would actually have less ability to build muscle, but it's not, because I use two compounds. They synergize each other, and I got the anti-inflammatory effect from the Deca, so it worked really well. As far as how long you can stay on it, Deca is not toxic in the conventional sense where the liver has to really work hard to get rid of it. What happens is if you stay on it all the time, your receptors kind of down-regulate to it. So I wouldn't stay on it indefinitely, but you probably wouldn't have any health problems if you did. I know I'm kind of hedging my bets on that one. So it really depends on what you're looking for. You might boost your red blood cells up higher on Deca, because Deca has that that red blood cell increasing effect as well, which I don't see as a problem. But if you notice maybe you're retaining a little bit more fluid, or maybe your blood pressure is going up, it might not be something you want to do all the time. You might want to just kind of cycle it in and out. But once again, it's really a personal preference. Health-wise, probably wouldn't have any ramifications.
Let's go to our Instagram questions. Again, if you're not following us, our handle is official_RxMuscle. If you're watching us for the first time on YouTube, hit the subscribe button below, hit the notification bell. Of course, with the Olympia 8 weeks away, we're going to be launching into our Iron Road to the Olympia very shortly. Interviews, preview segments, episodes of Iron Debate like the one we had earlier today. And as always, we appreciate your support. Let's go to it. It's Chicho. I actually have a few different questions regarding skin, loose skin in particular. What would be your best tips to minimize or getting rid of loose skin?
When the skin is so loose that it's hanging, because you've been overweight for a long period of time, or you've lost a tremendous amount of weight, there's not much you can do for that aside from surgery. However, I've seen people that had, just like a lot of fat in their body, and when they lost the fat, they looked like they had loose skin, but it wasn't like, you could tell, it wasn't that overstretched looking skin. It just was like, it was like a kind of like a roll, and those people improved over time, and actually it tightened up on a lot of the people that I work with. When you see that like almost stretch marky looking skin where you could tell it was overstretched because they were so heavy, that skin's not going away. I don't care what you put on it. You can put all the creams and wraps and all the other stuff that they sell out there. It's not going away until you surgically get it removed. But, like I said, regular skin, if you eat well and you eat a high protein diet and stuff like that, the skin should improve. As you're losing weight, it should retract a little bit. And it also, age has a lot to do with that too. Younger people tend to have better skin and more elasticity to the skin, better collagen. Obviously, if you're taking 1,000 milligrams of vitamin C a day, with your multivitamins and stuff like that, that could help too. Because remember, vitamin C is necessary for collagen synthesis. You could rub, I always say, you can't hurt rubbing virgin coconut oil on it. It seems like it helps everything. So it could definitely help with the moisturization of that skin in that area, and maybe help nurture its healing. I don't know. There's no proven anything. If there was a proven protocol, it would be out there. Everyone has their own little anecdotal, protocols. The key is, once you lose the weight, don't regain it again. The more that skin stretches and gets really thin, and this is the case even with muscle. I have areas of my body, even right here, because my arms used to be, 23 inches, 22 and a half inches. I had no fat on my body, but now that I lost the size and my arms are not that big anymore, the skin can be like a little looser down here because it's been stretched out, and I got stretch marks, to prove it, when I was competing. So while it's not hanging ugly because I'm not like emaciated, I definitely noticed on my lower back. I guaranteed if I gained 20 pounds of muscle, it would stretch it out again. So the good thing about, just loose skin that's hanging because maybe it was stretched through muscular growth versus fat, it's a different look, okay? But the problem with loose skin in an excessive amount in like an abdominal area is that there's no place for it to go. What are you going to do with it? Unless they cut it out, it's not going to ever look perfect.
Let's go to Tramonto. Dave, your opinion on Arthur Rea's cycles and insulin protocol without carbs, but with 600 grams protein daily.
Yeah, I think it's one of those risky, type of things that, people like to do like crazy things and maybe experiment. Arthur, may rest in peace. He was a good friend of mine. He had some extreme protocols that he had produced and conceptualized. Well, if I eat a lot of protein, I'll convert some of it to glucose, and I can drive that into the muscles with insulin. It's like unnecessary. It was like a exercise in futility. Why would you overeat protein to turn half of it into carbs and then take insulin to absorb it? Why not just eat the carbs? Why not just have, a few grams of carbs, in your diet with a little less protein and let your body's natural insulin handle it? So, I think a lot of these protocols are just like to see if it actually worked. And of course it does, because when you eat no energy source, no fuel source, but you eat an abundance of protein, your body will convert the protein into glucose. That's known. Especially in the absence of eating any fat in your diet. If you were eating fat in your diet, a lot of that protein wouldn't convert to glucose. But when you're eating 600 grams, you're putting a tremendous strain on your body to have to, deaminate all that protein and actually turn it into glucose. And then your body has to release insulin, for it, which is not a big deal because it's not a lot of glucose. But now if you're taking insulin on top of that just to draw, you're not going to get any results from it. I can't really endorse the technique, even though it was an interesting scientific experiment, which is what I think Arthur really intended to see if it actually did work.
We have a few different questions relating to gut health, so I'll take the one that kind of packages it all together. So Muscle Method, are probiotics a good staple supplement in addition to fiber to improve digestion and gut health, or is it conditional? And then another one from another subscriber was, in general, what will be your go-to supplement for gut health? I know it's something you talked about on your last Live With installment.
Yeah, first of all, if you take like a product like Fiberlize, and I'm not just saying this because it's mine, but I am, because I know that I formulated it, any kind of psyllium-based supplement is going to be superior to any other soluble fiber supplement out there because it's 8 times more potent on a gram-for-gram basis. So you want a high-potency, a high-potency soluble fiber supplement because of that aspect. So psyllium's the go-to. We all know that. But then there's different grades of psyllium. We use a high swell rate psyllium, which gives you the best bang for your buck, so to speak. You get the most out of it. And I've gone into this before, so I'm not going to reiterate it. But the point is that soluble fiber is used by the gut bacteria as food. They ferment it. And when they ferment it and produce, viable energy for themselves, they can reproduce themselves. So taking a daily, fiber supplement, that's high potency, like Fiberlize, you're actually nurturing and feeding the gut bacteria, which is good because it's going to keep them healthy. If you happen to have taken like a course of, say, antibiotics, or when I did my colonoscopy prep, where you take that drink and it wipes you out, just makes you poop your brains out, you're probably wiping out a lot of good bacteria. So at that point, you might say, maybe I should reseed the bacteria that are missing. In other words, put some new ones in there. So and a lot of times I'll go to my go-to is always like Bubby sauerkraut, which is a fermented sauerkraut they sell in like high-end supermarkets. You can do that. I used to add it to my food. Another really good one is Natren makes, there's a company called Natren, Natren. They make a refrigerated powdered probiotic formula. And what their whole thing is, you don't want to mix a lot of different probiotics together because then these bacteria compete with each other. And a lot of times they can try to like gobble each other up, so to speak, or counteract each other. So what they recommend is they make one for like, which is Megadophilus, is one of the formulas, and then they have bifidobacteria. So one of them is for, I forget which one. One of them is for your small intestines, one of them is for your large intestines. So like one day you would take the bifidobacteria, and I put it right into my Fiberlize shake at night before bed. Because let's face it, those bacteria are going to feed on the soluble fiber, so you might as well mix them all together, right? And then the next day I would go with the Megadophilus, which would be for the other, portion of your intestinal tract. And I would do that for maybe like a week straight, and then I would stop it. So probiotics are not something you need to take all the time because they should be repopulating your colon and small intestine and then growing. You don't need to constantly keep replenishing them. It's almost overkill at that point. So once you put them back and you make sure that you're feeding them with a good fiber supplement, they should regrow, and then you should feel that you have a restoration. Now, if you have a really bad gut because you have like colitis or Crohn's disease or ulcerative colitis, you might have to stay on the probiotic a little longer. And you might have to, go gently or go lightly, as they say, with the fiber, because sometimes it overstimulates, a situation like that. But by and far, I think like the fermented foods, like kefir. I like the coconut one rather than the milk-based one because I don't really do well on dairy. The fermented sauerkrauts, like Bubby sauerkraut, and then of course, if you want to go full bore and really just inoculate yourself with a high potency, probiotic, you go with like a Natren brand.
So two, I guess, contest-related questions. I'm going to try to package them together. The first one, basically, to sum it up, he wants to know. A lot of media outlets are not traveling to shows lately. Obviously, there's the specter of COVID, and he cites you and Chris doing podcasts, analyzing shows,
right.
Looking at pictures and videos, and asking almost if that's the new normal. Second, question about the fact that now they're bringing back Miss Olympia. Do you think platforms like RxMuscle will do more to facilitate interest in women's bodybuilding? I've been a fan ever since the days of Corey Everson. Hated to see it go. Really, the revenue draw isn't the same as with the men. But then he goes on to say that trying to find results, for Spain and Chicago Pro was just exhausting. So I guess for one, the new normal in terms of not traveling to go to shows for most media outlets, and two, do you think there will be a concerted effort, especially now with RxMuscle, with the Miss Olympia coming back to cover women's bodybuilding and fitness divisions?
Well, to pat Sid on the back a little bit, he always seems to find the results, or both of us seem to find the results as quickly as possible through all our little connections at the show and post results on, I know we do it right onto the RxMuscle Instagram. So if you guys haven't subscribed to that or followed that, you should follow us on Instagram so you can always get your results up to the minute. Now, as far as coverage and analysis, that it really is dependent on the show. Like today we have Teresa Ivankic is going to be being interviewed by me. She won the Chicago Pro Women's Bodybuilding, and she's one of the favorites probably going into the Miss Olympia competition. So we're going to cover the top people. Of course, Iris Kyle is a very good friend of mine. She's a 10-time Miss Olympia. She'll be returning to the stage. So I will cover women's bodybuilding. I've said it before. I think women's bodybuilding and women's physique should be combined. I think it's confusing now. It's kind of like when you have too many flavors of a protein. People don't know which one to buy. I think if you give them the best flavors, like in less choices, so to speak, they'll find it easier to wrap their hands around a specific champion. Imagine Shanique Grant versus Iris Kyle on stage. That's I've mentioned that before. That would generate a lot more interest in the sport. I think it would be almost like the Super Bowl type of thing of women's bodybuilding. So I don't know if they'll ever do that or not, but I have no problem covering these events. Sid will be going to the Olympia weekend this year. I know Chris will be there, so we'll definitely have coverage at the show, although it might be more limited than normal because of the fact that I think the audience is going to be very limited. They'll be doing their wrap-ups from the show, so at least they get to see it in person, and that's important. I hope by next year we're going to start being able to go to these shows again. But, there's a limited amount of shows we can go to just because these shows take forever. They're very long. There's no return on investment anymore. Nowadays it seems like everyone's doing live streams. If everyone could just get the live stream down pat and get some good quality live streaming, we could do analysis from that. They're pretty good. You have pretty good cameras nowadays, these 4K cameras. And it's a brave new world, it's different. It's not like the old days where we had to pack up the horses and head west, young man, to cover these shows. It just doesn't happen like that anymore. But we'll still be posting results and all that stuff, and you'll be able to find out who won and all the analysis on our website, and of course on Heavy Muscle Radio every Monday.
Dave, last week, do you remember if we asked a question about salt?
I don't know.
Yeah, so I don't think we asked. I know this. He asked it 2 weeks in a row. Can you explain the misconception with salt? And I'll add it, I guess, in terms, especially as it relates to bodybuilding, why we used to think it's bad. What's the real root of the problem that salt has been blamed for?
Well, I think people equate sodium and water retention with fat. I think there's this like in people's minds, they think that it's the same. I was just talking to an ex-client of mine who seems to be becoming a new client of mine again, and he was having trouble, losing weight, and we were going over some of the pitfalls of the diet he was following. And one of the things that was interesting is that a lot of these companies, there's two deceptive ways of marketing fat burners on the market. And it's because people want to see results right away. One of them is put a ton of stimulants in your fat burner, right? And wow, holy, I feel it. This thing must be burning fat, right? Because I'm racing, from all the stimulants in it. The other way, which is a little more deceptive, is put an herbal diuretic in your fat burner. Put something like, dandelion or uva ursi in there. And guess what happens? You pee a lot. And when you pee a lot because you're getting rid of water, because these herbal diuretics work, you lose weight on the scale, but you're really not losing body fat. So people think, wow, this fat burn is working. I started taking it, I lost, 5-6 pounds. Well, now you're walking around dehydrated and you feel like you have a hangover. You got a headache all the time. So water retention is not the same as fat loss. So anyone who restricts sodium their entire diet or takes these herbal diuretics on a daily basis, because some people take them purposely, they even know. They're like, I'm taking this watershed pill. I'm like, why are you taking this? How are you training dehydrated? I always have a headache. And water's your friend. Believe me, hydration is your friend while you're training because you want the muscles to be well hydrated. That keeps them in an anabolic state. Likewise, you don't want to be taking something that sensitizes you to water, retention. Because let's face it, if you take a diuretic, your body's going to always think there's not enough sodium and water around, so it's going to raise aldosterone levels, and the aldosterone is the hormone that makes your body retain fluids. And sodium. You don't want high aldosterone while you're dieting, because at the very end, when you have to dry out, you're not going to be able to. So you don't want to restrict sodium in your diet ever, okay? And you don't want to take herbal diuretics on a regular basis. That's why when I formulated Lipolyze, my non-stimulant-based fat burner, there's no stims and there's no herbal diuretics. I could have put that in there. People would have loved it, but I didn't do it because that's not the way you burn fat. You want to try to interrupt appetite, and you want to try to trick the body into wasting energy as heat. That's the best way to burn fat, and that's how I embrace that. But I think people have this misconception. I remember one of my first shows, I was backstage, and this guy's breath you could have knocked you over. And I don't even know how we got into talking about it. And he's like, he goes, yeah, I haven't had any sodium for like 6 weeks or something like that. I'm like, what? He's like, yeah, I didn't even brush my teeth this morning. I said, and so at that point I couldn't keep my mouth shut. I'm like, yeah, I can tell. And he's like, oh, my breath, yeah, I feel bad. I said, why didn't you brush your teeth? He goes, oh, sodium fluoride is in there. I said, do you know how much sodium is in sodium fluoride? You probably couldn't even measure it. I said, it's so small. So people do kooky things, They think that sodium is going to make them, not look good. But sodium is your best friend. Matter of fact, I don't even cut sodium until the last day, and a lot of times I keep it in because it's too much. When you feed someone sodium all the time and they eat a lot of salt throughout their diet, you pull sodium for one day and they lose so much water so quickly, it's almost too much. So the bottom line and take-home message is sodium and water are not fat. Don't confuse them. Don't restrict them.
Time for 2-3 more questions. Let's go to eGascarla. Dave, is it okay to eat whey protein and not drink it like a shake? For example, to eat it with oats and a little water, make it sort of a cream. Your take on that?
Yeah, I mean, you can do whatever you want. I used to eat the whey protein right out of the tub. It tastes, if you ever try it, it tastes like cotton candy almost in your mouth, but it gets obviously very, it takes all the moisture away from your mouth and it gets stuck in your teeth. But the bottom line is we used to do that back in the day. There's nothing wrong with that, but you definitely want to drink some fluids with it because it's obviously needs to be hydrated to be digested, efficiently, I guess you could say. It's hard to digest things, I don't know if any of you guys have ever, when you've done a show, you've been really dehydrated, eat your food, you've taken, stuff, vitamins, stuff like that, and it seems like it's almost like you didn't absorb any of it because you're so dry, your system, that you can't even digest the food. Then all of a sudden the show's over, you start guzzling water, and all of a sudden, all the stuff you took kind of hits you, boom. It's like you absorb everything all of a sudden. It's similar to that. So you don't want to, while it's okay to take in whey protein in less than ideal amounts of water with it, I probably would follow it up with a glass of water or some kind of liquid after I ate the food, just to make sure that I have enough moisture there to break down the protein.
We have time for one more question. I wanted to ask this again. People love hearing stories about your bodybuilding careers from the Winded Gypsy. What did a day of Dave Palumbos' old bulking diet look like? What was your favorite bulking meal?
I get asked this question all the time, and I answer it all the time. And you know what? I try to change the story a little bit every time just so that it's not the same boring story. I had a very boring diet. Ask my wife now. I eat the same thing every day. I'm like a machine. I really don't vary very much. I would eat probably when I was bulking, I couldn't get more than 4 meals in because I was eating so much food. I was probably drinking like 6 shakes a day. So back in the day when I was sponsored by Metrics, I would drink a Metrics shake with 100 grams of ultra fuel carbs in there. So I was probably taking in 120 grams of carbs. I was taking in, I used to add like a scoop of whey proteins. I was probably taking in about 45, 50 grams of protein per meal. I was doing that 6 times a day. And then I was eating 4 meals, and my meals would usually include a McDonald's meal. Everyone knows my notorious 2 triple cheeseburgers, fries, and 2 apple pies. And then the rest was pretty healthy. Then I pretty much had I did a lot of Chinese food. I would go get chicken and broccoli, and I would have them add like $3 or $4 extra chicken to it with like a big thing of brown rice. That was sometimes 1 to 2 meals a day. I would also go to, when I was at my biggest, I used to go to the diner. In New York, they have something diners. They're open 24 hours. I would go to the diner at like midnight, and I would literally have like a 12 to 14 ounce chopped sirloin steak, which is like a big hamburger basically, with French fries, a whole plate of fries. I would usually have sometimes I have matzo ball soup with it, or I don't even remember what my little things I used to have was back in those days, but I would do that like really late. That would be my last meal a lot of times right before bed. But then I would wake up in the middle of the night and I would have a shake. Literally 100 grams of carbs, 40 grams of protein. And because I had a really fast metabolism at that point. So, and probably, as another meal, maybe I would have, I had a butcher in the Bronx that would cut up chicken into like half-pound packages for me, and fish. And so I would do swordfish, I would do chicken breast, I would do salmon fillets. I would mix it up. I would do filet mignon. He'd cut up a whole filet mignon for me, and I would have those during the day. So it really depended on the time of year, but I was pretty much consistently eating, 4 to 5 food meals, with one of them being a little junkier. And then I was having, the late night one as well. And then I was also having like 6 shakes a day on minimum. Sometimes it was 7 shakes a day. So it was like literally 10 to 12 feedings throughout the day. And it was almost like around the clock. Like sometimes I would wake up twice at night, every like 3 hours, and have a shake when I was trying to really push my weight to its max, because I just couldn't gain the weight. And then of course you heard when I would get so sick of eating like the meals I told you about, I would go to my blended meals, which I told you was 12 whole eggs in a blender with a packet of Met-Rex, a scoop of whey isolate, a cup of apple juice, a cup of uncooked oats usually, and I would blend this thing in a blender with no top on it, because if I put the top would take up too much space. It would literally, I had it so figured out, the quantities, that the blender, when it was blending, it was like a cement mixer mixing cement. It was literally, there could have been maybe this much left. It probably was 1/4 of an inch from the top of the blender. Like if it would have been a little higher fluid, it would have poured out of the blender. And I would blend it up, and then I would get myself ready, and then I turn the blender off, and I take the whole blender. I never put it in a cup, and I would just gulp the whole thing down. It was literally a full blender of sludge, okay, because that's what it was really amounted to. And I would stand by this over the kitchen sink, and I'd be like, don't throw it up, don't throw it up, don't throw it up, and the saliva would be running in my mouth like I was going to throw up. And I would almost get the heaves, and I would talk myself down, and usually I kept it down. Sometimes the whole thing would come up, and the second I'd make it again and do it again. But that's how bad I wanted to gain the weight, and I had such a fast metabolism, that's what I needed to do.
Dave, we do have some breaking news, Tyler, if you want to hit the breaking news sounder. Breaking news, Big Ramy has officially received a special invite to the 2020 Olympia. Dave, in 45 seconds or less, your immediate reaction.
I know why they gave him the special invite. It's a marketing thing. They want Big Ramy in the show. With Flex Lewis out, I knew it was going to happen. Now, should it have happened or not, that's what we're going to talk about on Iron Debate today, and we can hear both sides of the story. Personally, I think it's a slap in the face to the other bodybuilders, but in terms of Ramy, I like Ramy. I'm glad he got the invite for himself. I mean, it's good for his brand. I just think that him and his team have to sit down and plan this out better. 2 years in a row, you don't qualify for the Olympia, and you expect an invite. I mean, it is what it is. You know, he's the biggest guy on stage. Everyone wants to see him be Mr. Olympia. We haven't seen him arrive yet. If he couldn't get ready for the Spain show, I don't know how he's going to be ready for the Olympia. But hey, I pray every day, because if Ramy ever shows up at his best, we'll finally have, you know, a huge Mr. Olympia again on the throne, so to speak, and it'll definitely raise the sport up. I hope Ramy can do it.
So there you have it. With that little bit of breaking news, that'll do for this episode of Ask Dave. Reminder, on RxMuscle.com, episode of Iron Debate, Heavy Muscle Radio, which has Dave and Chris breaking down the Chicago Pro. Loads and loads of content this week on RxMuscle.com, the RxMuscle YouTube channel. For Tyler Shore and Dave Palumbo, I'm Sadiq Faruqi. We'll see you next time.